Hi, everybody. Welcome to the America Unchained Project podcast. Today, you're going to hear from Janelle Campbell. Janelle is a wonderful peer advisor who deals with families and people who have trouble with different addictions. She has a wonderful story about taking care of herself while she was trying to help her sons through their own personal addiction. She also talks a little bit about what parents can look for, maybe some things they can do, but especially about not allowing shame to keep you from getting help. This is a huge, huge thing with Janelle and me as well. She is just a kind woman. She works online with folks. This is a short interview, and the reason we wanted to keep it short is I really want you to reach out to the organization she works for if you have questions, if you're interested in meeting with someone. Their organization is listed below. It's called We Face It Together. So Face It Together is the organization. Again, the information is below. And in the meantime, listen to the wonderful advice and story of Janelle Campbell. Today, we're talking to Janelle Campbell, and I am excited for her to share her story because this is a story that is all too familiar right now, and it's wonderful to hear someone who's on the other side who can give words of wisdom, but also perspective and honesty to a much needed situation. So, Janelle, thank you so much for being here, first of all. I know we've had a time to chat a little bit, but I just want to start by throwing you the mic and just saying, can you share a little bit about your story, and then how, after this experience, what led you to do what you now do today?
No problem. I have no problem talking about this whatsoever, and I appreciate you having me on. It's
Absolutely.
my pleasure, actually, to be here. Getting the word out is incredibly important in this day and age of, increased suicides and so on from um, substance use. So my story really started, I'll say about 20 years ago. I have three sons, two of which have struggled with substance use. And the first 10 years I spent really trying to figure things out myself, trying to fix the problem, because that's what we do as moms, that's what we do as parents. And it really took its toll on me. It really took its toll. My youngest son was home from college, and this is how I sort of started to figure it out. My youngest son was home from college, and he came home on Friday night and had a great time. And on Saturday morning, when he come bounding down the stairs, he's like, "Hey, Mom, I really want to talk to you about something." And his two older brothers who have had the substance use, that's not something, I sort of like go into fight or flight when one of my kids says something to me about that, at least at that time. And anyway, I said, "No, we're not waiting. We're going to talk now." And so he sat me down and he grabbed my hand and he said, "Mom, when I came through the door last night, if I hadn't recognized your voice, I would not, I don't think, recognize you on the street if I passed you, because those first 10 years had really, really taken its toll on me physically and emotionally, obviously, but definitely physically. I'm 5 foot 10 inches tall and I weighed 112 pounds. And so although I knew it when I looked in the mirror, but you just kind of, hey, my kids are coming first. I'll take care of myself later. And so that was kind of my first indication that somebody is physically noticing this, that I needed help, because I wasn't able to fix my kids' problems. And that just doesn't happen. And I knew that I needed to reach out myself to get some help. And I did. Finding help 10 years ago it's not easy finding help today, let alone 10 years ago. And so I did, by the grace of God, I'll say, find a coach. And I worked with her for a solid year every week. And I was working just on myself to bring myself back to who I was before, because you get so mired. It's that old saying, you can't see the forest through the trees. I was making bad decisions about my kids, bad decisions just about myself. And so I really needed to just kind of set their addiction aside for a little bit and take care of myself. And so that's one thing that I talk a lot about with parents when we first start coaching is taking care of their own wellness. It's so important, just having that clarity. So anyway, I spent that year working with her, with my coach, and then um, I started going to a support group. I tried a few of them out, and I think, like anything else, you got to find your own tribe. And I did finally find a group that was very, very supportive. They were, had been through some of the same things that I had. And from there, I started coaching individually, coaching just different people that I knew that were struggling with the same thing. And one thing just kind of led to another. And I think I shared with you earlier that I kept feeling like I was being called to something else because I knew the difficulty in trying to find someone that could help me when I really needed help, when I was willing to reach out for help. Because at first it's like, yeah, no, I'm going to fix this problem. No one's ever going to know about it. I'm not telling my family. I'm not telling work. Everything's going to stay the same until we get this fixed and then we'll just move on. And of course, it doesn't work that way at all. And so I started coaching for Face It Together, and I just never really looked back. I absolutely love doing it. It's I love when people are willing to get help themselves because so many people aren't like me. And that's a thimble size. I mean, and meanwhile, while all this is going on, my two oldest kids are the ones with the substance use issues. And there were legal problems and, problems at social problems for them. And while I'm coaching, I'm learning so much as I'm going on through this. And I don't know, like I said, in a thimble, that's kind of the way things happened for me to get where.
Yeah. And I know one of the things we talked about that I think is so important is that we deal with shame. As parents, we deal with shame about what could I've done better? What this is my fault. And I've learned I don't have time for that. Meaning if we need to make some changes and we're seeking a counselor or we're having a coach, then we need to make the changes and be fighting for our kids. But shame and pride, because my struggle would be on the area of pride, I'll call myself out on that, keeps us from really being well equipped to help our kids to fight the fight by reaching out for help. And so for people who are listening today that maybe they're suspicious that their child is abusing substances, and like your sons, they're already out of the house, or maybe they're looking for clues. Can you talk to the person who's worried but afraid to also reach out for help? Because I think some of us, we don't want to validate that this is a real thing. Like you said, we want to fix it, we want to take care of it, and then we might mention it on the other side, but not in the process. How would you encourage someone who's listening today that's either they know for certain their child is struggling with an addiction, or they are suspicious, but they're struggling to reach out because, again, they think I should be able to handle this. This is my kid.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We spend, like I was saying, that first 10 years, I wasn't going to tell anybody about this because there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of shame. And not only are my kids going to get judged, I'm going to get judged as a parent too.
Yeah.
And there is so much freedom in willing to be vulnerable and
Yeah.
reach out because, we're giving other people permission to do the same thing. And I find it over and over and over again. But getting back to your question, um, how to, navigate that, get through that shame and that judgment of ourselves is believe that it can happen to you.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
because it can. And that was, that's something that parents tell me all the time. I had this conversation yesterday with a mom. She says, I never in a million years thought it would happen to me. We got a great family, and I just didn't see it. And so, uh, just understanding and accepting that it can happen to you, and next, educate yourself about addiction. I was so uneducated about what addiction. I thought I knew. I mean, I grew up in a small town. You could tell who was, you know, spent a lot of time at the bar or whatever it is, but educate yourself, because it's not what you think it is in most cases. And it just really helps in being able to, for yourself, to make good decisions, as well as talking to your kids. You're just so much more informed, because I guarantee you, your kids know a lot. They're very well informed, usually. And it's, most of the time, it's probably pretty spot on because they're hearing it from peers or in school or whatever. But educating yourself makes a huge difference in accepting that it can happen in your family.
Yeah. How it also, this is something that I find is a wrestling match. And again, dads, I'm a mom, so I'm going to come from a mom perspective. But sort of that nurturing, like you want to take care of it. Let's pretend it's a maybe a high school senior, high school junior. They're still at home, but you see some patterns. You're seeing some stuff, and people are afraid to confront their kids because they're like, well, they're not going to talk to me anymore. They're going to blow me off. They're going to distance themselves. I'm going to lose them. So I'm just going to pretend I don't know for a while. And then I'm going to try and love this out of them, right? Or I'm going to try to keep those bad kids away from them, or whatever the stereotype is in our mind that we think I can fix this, going back to the I can fix it. And some of that is fear of losing your child, fear of them pushing away, fear of them telling you off and walking out the door. For those parents that are afraid to confront their child on their substance abuse, or again, any other addiction they may struggle with, how would you encourage them to intervene, and that, to be willing to take the risk, I think, of them being mad at you, of them pushing you away, because they're predicting the future, right? He's just going to be mad. She's just going to be mad. What would you say to that parent that it's fear that's keeping them bound?
Absolutely. One of the first things is, and if I go back and think about, because we as parents think all the time, like you mentioned, what could I have done better? And um, I think really just listening. And we say that all the time, listen to your kids, listen to your kids, but most people don't know how to listen to their kids. And so we call it active listening. Uh, just, make sure the phone's not there, the TV's not on, you're not distracted. You want to have that conversation with your kids and just listen. Because so often today, we do it in a lot of our conversations, is we're always listening for our kids to say something that we're going to respond back to and say, no, that's not right. Or, this is what I think about this. And, you should be doing that. And just really listening to them, keeping your mouth shut, and then uh, letting them share and letting them be heard, because I don't think a lot of times they feel like they really are being heard. And one of the things that I adopted a few years ago, and I use this with my kids to this day, and my oldest is 30 some years old. So, is when they're done sharing, I'll just ask them, I'll give them the choice. Do you want to hear my opinion on that? Would you like to hear what I have to say? And most of the time they'll say, no, mom, I already know what you're going to say about this. Or they'll say, yeah, I do, which is more rare. Or they'll say no, but they come back in 6 hours or 2 days or a week and say, what do you think about that? But so giving them that choice, just listening to them, giving them that choice. And it's, I had another thing on my mind here that I was going to say as we were going through that, but I think that's one of the biggest things is just being able to listen to them and let them feel like they're being heard.
Absolutely. And I like that. Do you want to hear my opinion? I think we're on autopilot to just give them our opinion or cut them off and say, "Well, that kid shouldn't have said that to you," or "That shouldn't have happened," or "Well, buddy, you shouldn't have said that to your teacher." Like just instantly giving them our opinion when they're actually being open with us and trying to talk about their day or something that happened. It's funny because the stereotype of women and being married to men is, honey, I don't want you to fix my problem. I just want you to listen to me. But I think as a mom, I struggle with, I'm not going to fix your problem once they reach an age, where they can make some decisions for themselves. I'm just going to listen. And then inviting them into, hey, thank you for sharing that. Would you like my opinion on that? And being willing to hear no, especially once they're teenagers, especially once they're figuring out life, because that is just such wise advice, because it is something that will shut a kid from telling you stuff, because they might feel like you're judging them. They might feel like you're ashamed of them. They might feel all sorts of things. Whether if you just listen to them and just say, would you like my opinion on that? Um, we all know we're not talking about something that's a safety issue. We're not talking about something that's dire and we need to intervene. Obviously, as parents, we've got to intervene, but especially I feel like once they're 15, 16, 17, maybe they're just saying, gosh, this kid said this to me. I'm really feeling this way about this class, or whatever it is they're sharing. We don't always have to fix it. If it's a we don't have to fix it sort of situation, it's so wise to listen, because it's going to build their trust to tell us more stuff. Um, I think just pretending I'm listening to this conversation versus being in it. I wanna kind of jump back in time a little bit. And even though I know your boys that struggle with substance abuse were out of the home when it started, this is still such an important question. Were there signs in hindsight? Were there signs you started to notice that clued you in, that maybe other parents are curious about? What am I seeing here? That maybe, at least in your case, you could speak to what you were seeing that ended up leading you to understand what they were struggling with.
Yeah, I've thought about this question many times over the last 20 years, and I've actually had the conversation with my middle son about his addiction and what do you think I missed when you were growing up? Because, we have a pretty open relationship. They know what I do, and before I ever started doing this, I talked to them about it because to a certain extent it exposes them as well. But he says, "Mom, there's really nothing I think that you did but or didn't do, but I think I noticed that just his behavior changed a little bit. Like he was really, I'll speak of my middle son, he was really into marching band. He loved it and he was really good at it. Um, and all of a sudden I noticed he was missing practices. The things that were important to him, he was missing. He would miss it. He would just, or be late or whatever. And the other thing was commitments to me or to anybody else. He started to slip on some of his commitments as far as, I'm going to help dad do this, or I'm going to be there to help. I'm going to drop off his little brother somewhere. He started missing things like that. And it's sort of absent-mindedness that, you know, when I think back on it, there were just little things like that. I don't think there's any one thing that points to it outside of if they're smoking in front of you or, whatever. Um, I don't think there are any outward sign, I mean, any specific sign, I want to say, but you know your kid. And um, one thing I was going to add too about talking to your kids, listening to them, start really early, like 5 to 7 years old, if you can, start really early so that it becomes a pattern and it becomes the norm for them or for you too to do that. And just trying to talk to them as calmly as possible. Um, sorry to digress on you a little bit, but um, the the other thing I wanted, sorry, the other thing I wanted to mention is when we want to have conversations with our kids and we want to talk to them, plan for it. Because when you think about it, we plan for work conversations, we plan for important conversations maybe within the church or wherever it is. But yet, some of the most important conversations we'll ever have with our kids, we wing it, you know? And so I think it's important to plan for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
That is such excellent advice because we do we plan out what we want to say when we're doing a presentation, or like you said, if you have to talk to someone at work that maybe you're having a challenge with, or just anything like you said at church, if you're like, oh, I gotta organize this or I gotta talk to so and so about that. um, and with kids, of course they're going to throw some curveballs at us that we're not expecting. But if this is a conversation that's important, have have some advice. Hopefully they're listening to Janelle today and they're like, I'm going to write this down, I'm going to be prepared, I'm going to tell why I'm concerned. And I think something too that goes along with that is lead. It's really hard not to lead with anger or from your point of view. And here's what I mean. Someone in my family um was was being told by their young son that his girlfriend was pregnant and a baby's coming, right? But her comment to him was, this is going to reflect on me. This is going to harm my reputation. This is shameful to me. Now, I have a lot of strong opinions about that, but it's tempting to make what your child is doing about you and how you feel about it rather than taking a moment. It's okay to say, I'm worried, I love you, but to offer that unconditional love, right? To just say, I I'm concerned about you, I'm worried about you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. You know so much better what to say, but to lead with love instead of judgment, I think is really hard for us as parents when we're just trying to correct the problem. But to lead with love and acceptance, even though the goal is the same. We want them to be safe, we want them to stop doing this, we want them to keep themselves protected. But how do you know? And I'm just saying, as a mom, I've learned the hard way. If I lead with love rather than judgment, even if the outcome is the same, it goes so much better. Otherwise, it can feel, at least again, I'm only speaking for myself, it can feel like I'm I care about me and not my kid. You know, I care about this bothering me. I care about this being an inconvenience to my life. I'm worried about my schedule and my, and let's face it, that is an element of this. But if that's all your child hears, whether it's intentional or not, I think that could separate them from coming to you too. Is they're like, well, mom, she's just worried about what this looks like for her. She doesn't really care about me. I say that being on the child end of things. Like I've been on the child as a child. I've received that sort of thing, and it doesn't bond the parent to you, you to your parent. And yet now that I am a parent, I kind of get it. Like I'm like, oh, that's kind of a default button for me. I have to push away. So like you said, if you plan it out, it's going to be so much easier to come at it with love rather than kind of making it more what can unintentionally sound like it's all about you rather than your child. For the final question, because ladies and gentlemen, I realize I'm not asking enough questions today, and that's why Janelle's here, is because she is available, and we're going to talk about that at the end. Available to just talk to, be reached out. This is what she does for a living. And I know some of you listening that have found this podcast are saying, oh my gosh, this is me. I need someone to help me to feel sane and not scared. But another thing I wanted to ask is, in hindsight, because hindsight's always 2020. Take care of yourself is a huge takeaway. You've said you've got to take care of yourself, and you will need a counselor too, maybe, or a coach, someone who's guiding you and encouraging you and cheering you on so that you really do take care of yourself. Also, just, be willing to have the hard conversation and just listen. But in hindsight, I know we talked about potential signs, and you mentioned kind of just your son's priorities changed. It just, he wasn't being quite himself. Is there anything that you wish you would have done sooner? Or you wish, this is the worst question in a way, because we all wish we could have changed stuff about our parenting, but specifically maybe once you realized there was substance abuse, is there anything you wish you had done better? Because there's always something I wish I could have done better. But is there anything you wish maybe you did do that you wish you could go back and fix?
Um, I'll start off by saying it's a hard question for me because I spend so much time with parents
Yeah.
trying to convince them that this guilt that they're still carrying 10 or 15
Yeah.
years later is not helpful.
Yeah.
Is not helpful. But um,
It isn't.
so
It isn't.
for me, as I look back, and again, in talking to my son, I'm not sure there was. If I had to say one specific thing, I'll go there. If I had to say one specific thing, he was struggling with something. So and this is nothing against people who have had divorces in their lives, but I did get divorced, and I think he was struggling with that. Although, you know, boys that are, my son was probably 15 or 16 years old, there's a lot of ego there. And there's a lot of, no, that doesn't bother me. I'm happy for you, mom and dad, that kind of thing. But I think I wish I would have paid just a little bit more attention to him instead of um, myself actually worrying about what was going to happen, what's my life going to be like after this, and just getting in caught up in the things that we as parents get caught up in, if that happens in your life, or even if, there's normal stressors, just everything, we just kind of miss stuff. And for me, that was really, I think was a turning point. And I'll tell you one other thing. Bad things happen to people. We know that. But there's also good things that don't happen to people. And I remember when my son was probably 10 years old, he adored my brother. He adored his uncle. And he was sitting downstairs and he was playing my uncle, or my brother was sitting downstairs playing with our little dog, and he loved him, and he was just loving him up. And my son walked up to him and was talking to him, and I had a feeling like my son wanted to be hugged by his uncle the same way that he was paying attention to that dog. And my brother, he didn't realize it. It kind of just went right past him. But there's little things like that, your gut, your intuition. I'm a big believer in listening to our intuition. And I wished, if my brother wasn't going to give him that, I should have got up and just went over and hugged him myself, you know? So I think there's little chances like that when I say good things should happen to people, but they don't. And it's no one's fault, but there's little things like that to watch out for. Like I said, gut instinct, intuition matters a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, Janelle, I first of all, thank you for even tackling that question, because you are correct. This shame is a prison that keeps us bound, and I am anti-shame because it doesn't help us. It is so hard to overcome. I don't know about everyone's story listening, but especially if you come from a home where maybe you were manipulated through guilt, and kind of that was just how you were raised, to put it on yourself is sort of your natural go-to. I did something wrong, I'm bad, I'm a bad person. And I just want to end by saying this world is out to consume our children, and it is trying to win that battle. And we as parents are often doing the best we can, but there are so many people who are further down the road than us, or who have overcome this or are working through it, but again, they've got such wisdom. We need each other, because it's so important that we don't lock ourselves in that prison of shame, and say, gosh, if I'd only, because like you just said, I don't know that I could have done anything different, because kids can hide things very well. There are reasons maybe they're trying certain things that we are beyond what we know. And kids are trying to be their own person. And in doing that, they're going to make mistakes and pull away, and sometimes make really big mistakes. So I want to end, parents, by hearing exactly what Janelle said. Walk away from the shame and just reach out for help, because Janelle is not going to shame you. I certainly would not shame you, because our kids are more important than these emotions we have to push through to get help for them. But it starts by getting help for yourself, by being equipped yourself. And that's so key in parenting any child who's suffering through anything. In my case, my child is not suffering with substance abuse, but he was abused verbally and emotionally, and we had to intervene on his behalf when we found out about it. And it was really just this cyclical thing that had gone on we were unaware of. So it's a different thing. But the way he treats himself, the way we're having to go to people and read books and find out and ask questions and get advice. And we've consulted with 3 different counselors, honestly, just so that we had a spectrum of information, because they didn't know us. Or it has been life-changing to get this help from other people. And I can only imagine that this would be the same experience. So Janelle, I know I mentioned it before everyone saw your beautiful face, but can you just recap how they can reach out to you and how they can find you? And I want to say, before she says this, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a telemed situation where you're limited to being in her location, which is immensely helpful. So anyone from anywhere can reach out to Janelle. And can you just remind us of the organization you work
Absolutely.
for?
Thank you. It's easiest to get a hold of us by going on the internet, and it's at wefaceittogether.org. I think the name says it all. What you were just saying, that
Yes.
this takes all of us if we're going to
Yeah.
keep this from, being slid underneath the rock where it's typically been in the last 10 years. Um, is
Yeah.
We Face It Together, and that's wefaceittogether.org. And it
Absolutely.
will, you have to know that there is no judgment there. I think people coming through our
Yes.
doors, their number one fear is that they're going to be judged and they're going to be told what to do. We do not do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It starts with, and that just builds trust to like you said, face it together. And it's not I've heard people say concerning other things, I never thought I'd be in this
Mhm.
group, right? This isn't a group I thought I'd be
Mhm.
part of. And yet I'm so glad to have a support system. I'm so grateful that there are people there to cheer me on, to fight through me for my kid, and to love my kid vicariously through me. I think it's important that we all realize, like, this is about your kids, but you have to take care of yourself. You cannot be of service to your children if you're frayed out. And I'm just so proud of your son, even though I don't know him, that he came to you and said, Mom, I love you enough to
Mhm.
say this hard thing.
Mhm.
You've got to get help. You're not doing well, and I want you to be healthy. So Janelle, thank you for your grace, your honesty, your humility. It is so exciting for me to get the word out about people like you, because like you said, we do face this together. And even if you're listening and you're thinking of a child that isn't your own, you guys, this is a generation who is being forgotten in some ways, and we have got to join together and fight for them. You might have a friend in mind, or a niece in mind, or a friend whose son is going through this, just to hear this and maybe hopefully grow more compassionate to their situation. Make them dinner. You don't have to make a big deal about it. You don't have to preach at them. You just make them dinner and say, I want you to know I love you and I support you. And I am fighting for you. So if you need even just to talk and me not give you my opinion at the end, I want you to know. And then hopefully you can connect them to someone who has more experience, like someone like Janelle. So Janelle, this has been so wonderful. Thank you for taking your time to educate us. And I will be in touch. And all of this information, ladies and gentlemen, as usual, is right below. Please reach out to Janelle or even me if for some reason you have questions. I'm happy to field them the best I can and get you to Janelle because she's the expert on this, not me. Thank you again.